Okay, as I'd mentioned in the announcement, I wasn't happy with what I posted. I think I was just frankly too tired to really be thinking. And I wanted to do this PDC project, this workshop, um, justice. We did a very extensive trip through chapter 13 for Monday, and we looked at decision making, and decision analysis, walking all the way through problem formulation, like using payoff tables, influence diagrams. And we're going to look today at decision trees. We looked at just making decisions without probabilities attached to them. And then we did decision making with probabilities. That's where we moved into the concept of the realm of the concept of expected values. Then we started looking at doing some work in risk analysis and sensitivity analysis. And this, we're going to look today at the PDC model. PDC is a company. They make condominiums, and we're going to look at their tree model. As always in management science, we try to use a technique or a model from nature. We're always looking for a model, and you'll hear me say this every time. Chapter 1 in the book covers that, and we try to identify the objective function, that is what I want to solve, the variables that will need to change, and then any constraints that we operate under. Then we begin to plug in those numbers and we perform the optimization. Well, we've moved to the point now that we're looking at problems and we're looking at the process of decision making. Now remember, back in chapter 1 and chapter 2 of the text, we said there's a difference in problem solving and decision making, okay? A good example would be our relationship with automobiles. The technology exists for us to have mass transit that would be far cheaper and better for the planet than what we do now with our vehicles. And we could even have them arranged in pods so we could have our privacy, we could tailor them to our needs, etc. But people want their cars, and the industry is there. So we have the capability to solve the issue of mass transit, but we haven't made the decision to do it. Okay? So we're at that point now where we're looking at that kind of situation, and the tree model lets us take probability. And with probability, there are permutations. That is, branches off of a tree. As I make a decision and I get one outcome versus a decision on another outcome. Okay? So you'll want to go into the chat in chapter 13 in the Excel files, and you're going to open up the PDC model. And that's going to be due on the 26th, which is Friday. It's due at 5 o'clock. You also have some exams, okay? I had some resources there for you. This is a PowerPoint from chapter 13. I hope you'll take a look at it. Chapter 13 is a way for us to put our toes in the water, maybe our foot, in learning about decision science. We're learning about management science. Decision science and decision analysis is its own particular field, and it deals with probability. Assumed probabilities, i.e. implicit probabilities, or as we've seen, explicit probabilities, where we attach the probability of, say, a condition to an expected, to a payoff, which then gives us an expected value under probability. Well, And then there's also, I have a resource here for you on the tree plan guide, and I think a very important resource for you that deals with the difference between estimation, extrapolation, prediction, and forecasting. Then I walk you through, because we're dealing with a capital budgeting problem, some of the relevant cash flows, business case analysis, and business case, what's that all about? A short course on forecasting, the Good Judgment Project, and one of my favorite websites, Nate Silver's 538. Well, I really do hope that you'll take the time to look at these resources. I do think that you're going to find that you'll see some models. And again, this is not to make you into some kind of a decision geek or math geek. This is for you to understand, okay, as I've said over and over and over, when we look at any problem in business or really any type of problem we encounter, we should understand that we have two things in play. The states of nature, that is the conditions under which we operate, versus our options in terms of addressing those states of nature. In fact, in chapter 13, we revisit some old friends of alpha and beta risk. We look at the risk that we'll get a false negative versus the risk we'll get a false positive, and they incorporate that in decision analysis, and we've talked about that before. In fact, we talked about it when we did the case there in the Data Smart text, where we talked about when we were building that predictive model with the email, trying to determine if, pardon me, not email, but with the tweets, if the tweet was about that product or not. As the mandrel was the product. And so we have to weigh off false positives versus false negatives. And we talked about the kinds of things that come into play. If I go to the doctor, which would I rather have happen? Let's say I'm going to be tested for cancer. I'm going to be tested for cancer. Do I want to have a test that gives me a false positive? Okay, and I get alarmed and concerned, and they do some more tests. I come back and they go, "Oh, no, you're okay." Or am I willing to gamble with the kind of a test where it misses the cancer? I get a false negative. It says, "No, you don't have cancer," when I actually do. That's the nightmare that modern medicine works with every single day, missing that, getting a false negative. And I'm one of those people, like when I complain about all the tests they'll want to seem to do to you and how much you charge and all that. But what they're really trying to do is trying to work through that scenario analysis where they say, what is the state of nature based on what the patient tells me as their symptoms? And knowing that and having a sense of the probabilities, then they begin to run through a list of possible causes. And then once they've done that, they begin to work through the decision making of, okay, what do we do to address it? Let's look at the PDC project, and we're going to see a tree model here, and we're given a guide to it. We'll talk about it just a little bit, and I'll open this up. Okay, this is from chapter 13, and again, this is the PDC model. It's this company that they're trying to decide if they want to. They want to build condominiums. And they don't. They've got some ideas about economic conditions, business conditions, and so they're trying to look at what will be the payoffs for them, the estimated value for them if they choose a particular alternative. Well, before we do that, let's talk about a tree diagram and what it is. And you can see here. If you took this, it looks like a tree because it's got branches and then branches breaking off from it. And what this does is this models permutations. And we see those out in nature all of the time. You look at a tree and you see it has leaves and it has branches, and they eventually, if that tree matures enough, those things grow and they fill out. And all of that, those are just simply permutations, the outcome of chance events that occur based on temperature, food, all kinds of things. And we do know that there is uncertainty in the world in general, okay? Because we live in a fallen world, we live in a world that has uncertainty. Things break, things get old, accidents happen, people forget things, people make mistakes. We misread situations. We think that the market's going to go up, but it actually stays stagnant or it goes down, on and on and on. Well, we try to build a model for that, and literally we're now at that stage where we are, and we look at this model here. I'm going to talk about it for just a minute. Anytime we have a square, we've arrived at some juncture, okay, in the model. So the squares, like you see the square 1, all right, we've got this one decision about how are we going to build. Do we think that the demand will be strong, or will it be weak? Given that that's the case, what's the payoff if we build a small complex versus one that's medium versus one that's large? Okay. Now we'll see the circles. Those are decision nodes. You say this sounds a lot like a network. Yes, it is. Okay. And we see each circle represents a decision. I can take this road and assume it's going to be strong. I can take this road and assume it's going to be weak. All right. And then we move over here to the data table. And let's look at it. The probability that we'll have strong demand. Now, you say, why don't we use the probability that there will be weak demand? And we could. If we were going to be truly thorough with this, we'd we'd take this model and we'd look at probability of weak demand and replicate this, except using those figures using the weak demand figures. Then, and in truth, we mix them in, and then we get the forecasted value, and then we're going to use a conditional statement that helps us determine what's the best decision, to go small, medium, or large. Now, in this particular situation, we're going to see something that's very interesting. And one of the things, and what I asked you to do for this assignment was to simply upload, open the file, download it to your desktop, and then we're going to change the level of demand, what we believe will be the percentage with which there will be a strong demand. And we're going to run through that. Now, there's, again, some fairly lengthy conditional statements. The author here is going to use the logarithm. He's going to use the logarithm function so we can create some true natural numbers that we can compare. We're going to use the ABS, the absolute function. We're going to use the choose function. There are a number of those here that it would probably not be a bad idea for you to take a look at them over in Microsoft Office or go to Easy Excel and look them up. There are probably 10,000 videos about them on the web on those particular functions. So, and then remember, of course, each of these lines, the blue lines, these are called the arcs. So we have this square, the starting point, okay? This is a a node, and then we have a chance node. This chance node is where we make a decision based on what we think conditions look like. Okay? And we have three of those. We have one if we believe that the demand is small, one if we believe that the demand level will be medium, and then if we believe the demand model will be will be strong, excuse me, or a lot. And so then we decide, are we going to build a small or a medium or a large complex? So we just simply use this tree to help us just simply handle the permutations and put them out there in a way we could see them very clearly. And then we begin to work with the probabilistic functions. And the math is not all that difficult. It's tedious, and that's why there are a lot of commercial products out there that people will use. Now, we're looking here at building we're building complexes or condominiums. We could use a tree model in trying to determine the level of demand for seats on a subway. We could use this model to try to look at the level of demand for an interstate highway, a stretch of interstate highway, and knowing that demand put in, i.e. the number of thousands of tens of thousands of cars or millions of cars will drive over it, and start to do some estimation instead and say, okay, are there stretches here where we really have to have excellent building and excellent materials? And then are there some parts that aren't as heavily traveled that we could maybe you cut a corner or two in terms of cost or quality? Of course, if we build one of these big clovers like you ride in the city, or a gigantic junction like Choctaw Road, where you have Choctaw Road, and you'll have the spur from the turnpike coming off of there, and then you have 240 and 40. That will have to be, or should be, a highly well developed, engineered, and built project. If not, you'll end up with what they had before, which was a pot fill hole death trap. And again, engineering things advance, materials advance. And when you think about it, when you drive down the highway, you and I never really stop and think about how much of a pounding that concrete takes. We just know if we hit a batch, we get angry and upset. It's the same with streets. And so as we're going through the process of trying to learn about how the materials, how well will they hold up, okay? And then something unexpected happens, like the farmer who has 150 acres next to you decides to sell out, and here comes the home builders. And then the street gets torn up because you have all that heavy traffic going over it. Well, this is a simple problem compared to those, but nonetheless, we're looking at these permutations, and again, the square is a starting point. It's a locational node, if you will. Then we go over here and we follow the arc. That's the blue line. And you say, this sounds a lot like network analysis. It is for sure. And then we look at the circles, and those are decisions. And then we see the triangular icons, and those are payoffs. Okay, so that's what's going on here. Now, there are some times when students will tell me, or they'll write an evaluation, why don't you really just go deeply into the math on all of this? Well, okay, let me say this. First of all, The authors in this textbook will really walk you through the math if you really want to get a dose of it. I don't believe I'm here to make you into mathematicians. I do believe that I'm here for you to have a general understanding of how some of those concepts apply to common business problems and to understand enough about statistical reasoning to handle the machine. A Formula One racer doesn't have to know every single thing about how that car was made. Most of them probably do because they're intellectually curious and they're writing in a thing and their life is online. But they do need to understand some things. They need to understand how it reacts to airlift. They need to understand how it reacts at certain speeds and at certain angles. They have to understand things like how well does it handle sudden stops or a potential controlled stop. Folks that drive in Formula One types of events, they traverse a city in a countryside. It's not like a NASCAR where they get in these powerful engines and go around in circles, although that's its own type of business there. And again, they have to learn how to drive. Okay. The folks at NASCAR may not know all the math and all the physics of airflow, but they certainly understand how to let somebody carry them and then push around them. Okay, it's the same story here. Your job is to understand the statistical reasoning. Let's talk about that. What are some of the key things or takeaways from this lesson? Well, let's look at it. First of all, we have to take a look at what we believe to be the states of nature. And we have two choices, strong or medium, strong or weak. The state of nature being the demand. So why isn't there a medium demand? I don't know. Right? Now, in commercial products that are out there, you can get that continuous kind of demand schedule set up. So the state of nature, it's not binary. It's more it's like a continuous line, and in reality, that's probably what it is. But to simplify things, the authors say, okay, we're going to assume that there's an 80% probability the market will be strong for these, the demand, and a 20% chance they will be weak. We see the same thing. We apply that to the medium, and the outcomes we'll get if we build a medium-sized complex. And then we come down and we look at how that might work out if we build a large complex. Now, one of the things that we need to understand, and that's exhibited here in this tree model, is the concept of risk-reward. Okay? Let's talk about that for just a moment. And the whole chapter has alluded to that when we talked about opportunity loss or regret, minimax, where we try to minimize our maximum loss, a conservative approach, an optimistic approach to decision making, naive approaches, etc. Okay, let's look at that. If the demand is strong and we build a small complex, the payoffs are not that fantastic. Okay? Now, we'll have an opportunity loss if the demand is strong, and we could have built a complex with 20 buildings, or we could have built a large complex and made $20 million. We're kicking ourselves because we left money on the table. Okay? By the same token, there's the reality that if we misread conditions and they're actually weak, and we build a large complex, we're going to lose our shirt. So it's risk reward. And the risk reward paradigm says the greater the risk, the higher the reward. And if we were to sit down and take a look at a simple line chart of risk and reward, we'd have the level of risk, okay, down on an X, say down on the horizontal line, on the X-axis. On the Y-axis, we'd have the payout, and we would assume little risk, little reward, and it would be linear, because the higher the risk we take, the greater the reward we expect. Okay, and that's the type of probabilistic thinking that permeates, most business people, and well, it should, and you understand that concept. But it is, of course, a two-edged sword, because if you misread and you overcommit, you can have disastrous results. It's one thing to guess that the demand's going to be large and you build a small complex, but you guess that the demand will be strong, but it's actually weak, and you build a small complex, because you're going to end up with a reward. You're going to make $7 million. Okay. If you guess that the economy is going to be strong, but it's actually weak, the demand, and you build a medium-sized complex, you might end up with $5 million. So far, your $8 million and your $5 million don't look so bad. If you come down here, though, to the large complex, and you believe that the demand's going to be strong, but it's actually weak, you lose $9 million. So if I look at the difference between the two of these, making $8 million versus $9 million, there's a $17 million differential between the two of them. That's pretty substantial. And opportunity loss, and you'll hear people talk about it. For example, if I guess that if I think the economy demand will be weak, right, and it's actually strong, and I build a small complex, I'm going to make $8 million, but I'm going to be going, why didn't I build a large one so I could make $20 million? And $20 million minus 8 is the opportunity loss. But opportunity loss is an illusion, okay? Technically, statistically, mathematically, it exists. But there's a lot of there's a lot of noise in that signal. If you take opportunity loss as a signal, i.e., wow, what could have been? Well, that's great. I understand that. But better you make 8 or 7 than you lose 9, even if you'll make 20. And again, the contrast here between these two expected conditions. Again, the authors, in order to simplify, give you a binary picture. The demand is strong, the demand is weak. And that fits nicely within the little payoff matrix, although a strong, medium, or weak demand would fit nicely with building a small, medium, or large complex. Those are nice matrices. One has 6 cells, the other has 9. I prefer the larger matrix, dealing with the level of demand as less binary and more dynamic. But that's just me. But let's look at that for just a minute. We'll see. Here we have the demand level. All right. If we think it's strong or if we think it's weak. And that's the same case. Now let's look over here at the table for a moment. And we see this, the probability of a strong demand, the expected value that we'll get from that, and the best decision. And if we start with this, this is a probability demand. We have an empty cell here, okay, for the probability. We have an expected value 7.70460. You'll notice that's what we've got over here at A16. And then we use the choose, and here it is. We use the cell reference. And then we use the choose function. Let's talk about this for just a minute, because what we have is a data table. Now, this is what we call a single variable data table. When you took Business 1123 with me, if you did business problem analysis, you remember just about the last Excel case that we did was we did a time value of money problem where we built a data table. We used the data function, the data table function, excuse me. And what we did was we said, okay, at a given level of interest or discount rate, okay, and at a given level of annual income, what's the profitability index? And you remember we ran that, and then we used conditional formatting, and you remember we were right in the middle there because we had some assumed values, and then you could see the green and the red, and the higher the interest rate, okay, and the lower the annual income, the redder the cell was. And then we moved in and had that gradient. Well, it showed us, and I made a point of telling you, and I hope that you'll have that kind of in your brain from here on out, to tell you that when we make a decision, there's a whole continuum of possible outcomes. Right? When we look at states of nature, we have to understand. Let's have think in your mind for a moment. A graph, okay? And well, let me pop one up here for you. I haven't done any annotation in a while. Let me do a little bit. So I'm going to create I'm going to draw a shape here for us, and I'll just do that. It is a nice square. I'll go over here. Okay. And then I'm going to get a, let's see, I want to create a line. So I'll find the little doohickey to let me create a line. That's the spotlight. Okay. Oh, there we go. And I can draw. Okay. And remember the quadrants. And then I'm going to choose a text. And remember we had known states of nature. Okay. And we had unknown states of nature. Now, a little more text and then on the side. And I'll do my text. And well, let me reverse that for a minute. There we go. I have known responses, and then I have unknown responses. Let me think about this. I'll move this U down here. There we go. I think that'll work for us. Beautiful. Now, remember, you've heard me talk about this before. I have known and unknown states of nature. Let me finish this off by drawing my little tool here. I get a line, and I'll divide that off. There we go. There's a nice little matrix for us. Okay. So I've got known and unknown states of nature. I've got known and unknown alternatives, ways to address those. All right. So we always need to be mindful of the fact that we have a continuum of states of nature. We also have a continuum of alternatives. Where we become valuable as managers is when we work in this quadrant over here. Okay? Where I can look at an unknown state of nature, something that's a surprise. For example, a new entrant comes into our market completely unexpected, and I find a way to deal with that. I had not anticipated, but I address it. I'm a money maker if I'm doing that. Okay? On the other hand, I'm also doing well if I have that situation, okay, where I just deal with the routine, ordinary problems. Okay? I know what the problem is. It's pretty typical, so I know how to address it. That's just dealing with things and status quo kinds of operational issues. I've got to do that for my company to function. And then I have the situation, of course, where I have the unknown. Okay? Then I'm also going to have these situations where I have a known problem, okay? But I don't have any way to work with them. That's the tough one. Everybody knows about employee turnover. How do I prevent it? Okay? Or I have that situation where I have a known solution, but I'm not quite sure if it's the right one for the problem I'm trying to address. Because if we've been listening, we also understand about two problems. One is the law of unintended consequences. I make a decision, I set some things in motion, and I had no idea how it would turn out. How did I get here? How did that happen? The other is what we call the myth of, we call it the fallacy or the myth of the equifinality of inputs. You say, what in the world are you talking about? It's from systems theory. We talk about it some also in here. The myth or the fallacy of the equifinality of inputs says this: if I take a piece of material and I do certain things to it, every single one I work with will be the same. Theoretically, when we build a car, automobiles, except for airplanes, have the greatest amount of sophistication built into them. They are the smartest things on the planet. And if you want to know why they're so smart, well, if you go drive, you're going to see people drive like maniacs, but they don't get killed. Why? Because engineers know that people drive like maniacs. And so cars are highly engineered, especially on handling and braking, because they figure most people who are driving them are just plain stupid. And that's just the truth. Okay. But in reality, it doesn't always work out like that. Or if I have, if I'm a bakery and I put in the same amount of dough into a mold and I put it in the same type of temperature, every single one will come out the same. Okay? But you'll always find that piece of bread that's a little bit burned, a little bit scorched, something like that. You'll always find an imperfection. Why? Because there, even if we have equal inputs, we can't be assured that the inputs will be processed the same. We just can't. That's because we live in a fallen world where things are imperfect. And we can think we're putting in equal inputs when we're really not. That's something that's happening now in education. And you and your kids are going to have to figure this out. We cannot take a child in one type of school district, in one environment, in one home environment, at one socioeconomic level, and expect them to perform the same as a kid in another one. If you look at achievement scores and college success and all that, look, except for some, given a few exceptions, the richer a school district you grow up in, the better you'll do. The higher the income in your zip code when you're growing up, the better off you'll be. That's just reality. That doesn't mean that people won't move up. And one of the great things about this country was that we had people who came in here poor. They could work hard and send their kids to school. And they may not live a middle-class lifestyle, but their kids could. We've just down the past 30 years had the first time where we have a generation of children who will be better off than their parents. And that's always been the promise of our country. And we're going to have to find that and get that back. When you hear people complain and talk about income inequality, folks, they're not communists or socialists. They're people who are saying we can't continue to have these disparities in wealth because the super rich don't use all of their money for productive purposes. And those who are the have-nots are disenfranchised, and they feel disenfranchised. So the notion of the equality of inputs, equifinality of inputs it's insane. When I hear someone say, you can do anything you want, theoretically in God's world that's true. But let's face it, I'm not 7'3", and I can't shoot a basketball with the precision of somebody in the NBA. If I could, I wouldn't be talking to you. Well, at my age, I'd be retired by now. If you don't have the athletic prowess, you don't. If you don't have the gray matter, you don't. You may work really hard, and you may master a subject just because of your grit and determination. And for many people, that's how it doesn't come easy. For others, they're just brains. There are people who are artists who can play an instrument and make the thing just come alive. The rest of us, we hated music lessons or couldn't do well with them. You get what I'm talking about. Well, let's erase this here and we'll continue on. I got off on a little bit of a tangent, but there are things to think about. One of the things I've learned over the years is that good business people and good business owners tend to be armchair philosophers because they deal with a lot of things in life, especially as they build a business or they try to build a career, that you have to think your way through. Now, let's look at this table, and this is what we call a one variable table. And notice what happens. We're going to use the choose function. Okay. And in this it says equal choose B15. Okay. Now let's find B15. And that's the number 1 over here. And it will be small, medium, or large. All right. Let's click on the functions and think about that. Here we have the index number. Okay. And the index number specifies, it tells us which value argument is selected. The index number must be between 1 and 254, or a formula or a reference to its number between 1 and 254. Well, we're given a index number and it's B15 and the value there is 1. Then we come to value 1. This is a cell reference from which choose to select. Okay. And we have medium. And we have large. Now, we can get some help on this function, and I want to do it. And here's a nice little article from Excel that tells us and they give us, for example, if the values 1 through value 7 are the days of the week, choose returns one of the days when the number is between 1 and 7 is used as an index number. Okay? You'll want to look at that. It gives you a little bit more of an example. Now, as we walk through this table, we see it's a one variable table. It's H1. And we choose the expected value. And then based on that, we get a decision. Okay. Now, I want you to notice something. As the probability, okay, for strong demand increases, the expected value increases. Why? Because we've assumed if we have strong demand, we're going to sell more complexes. Now, here's where, again, these models can fall apart. They're very elegant, okay? But let's say, for example, in your PDC and every indicator says, hey, there's a strong demand for housing, strong demand for apartment complexes or whatever it is they build. I think they're apartment complexes or condominiums. And you say, wow, I'm getting in on that. But you have a competitor who produces a much better product than you, more square foot for a lower price, maybe better amenities, maybe a better location. Your assumption that you'd sell all those units if the demand is strong on paper is good, but in reality, it's not. Okay? That's why these models, people will say they're no good. You've got to go into these looking at them with both eyes open, and you've got to be remembering it's a model. That's all it is. Okay? So as we look here, and then eventually when we get to the, that the probability of strong demand is 1.0, we build our expected value is 20, and we build a large complex. Oh, if it was that easy. I wish it was. Well, let's look through these. Let's follow the tree along. And our first choice is small. And we decide that if the demand is strong, then we're going to build 8. Well, here's our expected value. Okay. And our expected value, we're going to use the logarithms here, where we take 1 minus E7, and that's divided by 1. And then that number is multiplied by 1, and we get the log, the natural log of the number. Okay. Now, the probability here, we'll take a look at this first, and this is kind of a tricky conditional statement. Equal if, okay, we're working on the conditional statement, we have this is the absolute number of 1 minus the sum of H1 and H6. Well, H1 and H6 equal 1. So we've got the sum of 1 minus 1, and we get 0. If that is less than or equal to 0.00001, then we get the sum of H1 times I5 and H6 times I10. So that's where we get the probability. And there's our natural, we use the logarithmic to create a natural number. So we've got standardized or real numbers we can work with. And the same process works down here for the medium and for the large. Now, what I'd ask you to do is to do some scenario analysis and look at this and say, okay, let's play around with some of our assumptions. All right. And what I asked you to do for the exercise was pretty easy. Let's assume, for example, that here in H1, that rather than instead of the demand being the strong demand, we forecast an 80% chance of a strong demand. We forecasted 70. And notice what happens. Our expected value goes down, but we're still choosing it over the medium and the large. When students look and see the best decision is small, 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 it is. In this case, Because if demand is strong, say if we even if we have a great competitor, we build a small complex, we might get their overflow of customers. We might just be in on the bonanza, but not be a big player. Our risk posture is much lower. Okay. And I'd say, okay, well, let's put this back to 80. So we reset it. Now we'll just do that. And now this time we're going to make it 60%. Let's see what happens. Strong demand. And notice we're still choosing strong. And then I think I said 70, 60, and I was having you do 55. Forget that. Let's just do 50. And we're still choosing to build. Our best decision is to build a small complex. Now, I'm going to build a little table over here, and I'm going to put probability of strong. And the expected value and best decision. And I just want to play with it. Now if we say, okay, if the probability of it's strong, okay, and I'll put a 50%. I don't need to do that. I'm going to use a formula anyway, 50%. Okay. And our expected value is 7.3799. And in this case, it's small. Then let's take our probability that it's a strong demand to 60%. We'll put it to 80% just to kind of reset the thing. 80%, not 800. Okay, now we're ready to do 60%. And we get at 60%, we're going to get an expected value of 7.4769. And our decision is to build a small one. Then let's say the probability is 70%. Let's do our reset here. And we'll make that 80%. So I'm just kind of resetting the thing. And then I'm going to say I have 70% probability. And here's at 70%. And we get a 7.5843. I'll bet you anything. Okay. And then we've got small. And notice how we mirror these these expected outcomes over here in the data table. And we're using a one variable data table. And then finally we say, okay, well, let's put that back to 80. And that was our base case. Now we get the 7.7046. our best decision is to choose small. Now here we have what we're going to call a base case. Okay. And then this will be scenario 1. This will be scenario 2. And this will be scenario 3. If you check the data table, you see at 80%, our numbers match up at 70%, at 60%, and at 50%. Notice as the probability of strong demand goes down, okay, the expected value goes down, but it remains with a small complex. Conversely, as the probability of a strong level demand goes up, the expected value for the small goes up. And it's the one we would choose. Okay? This dynamic here helps us understand about exposure to risk. Now, if you can afford to lose the 20 million, if you can afford to lose the 9 million, you can probably try to afford to make the 20 million or thereabouts. Again, this is intended to get you to think about these, to ask, what do these look like? And we have the base case, and then a scenario 1, scenario 2, and scenario 3. Right? Well, I think we've covered this, and I think I've added enough for you here. Just for the technical piece of it, let's look at the medium. Okay, and this is in our base case, so let's click here. And this is the natural log. And here we're going to take the natural log of E17, 1 minus E17, and that divided by 1 times 1. And this is this conditional statement. Notice over here have the NA, that's not applicable if we hit that. And here it is for the large, complex, natural logarithm. And here we are. And that probability. I'm way off the charts. Okay. Well, I think that's going to do it. As I mentioned before, the chapter pages 618 through 35 really highlight this. And I'm going to save this, I guess. I think I'll call it PDC model done. Now, chapter 13, there's some tremendous insights there for you to get. Tremendous. At the same time, I want to make sure that, look, if you don't want to read chapter 13, download the PowerPoint and take a look. It's not too bad. I preview all of those. I don't want to let you have death by PowerPoint, but on occasion, if I see one, I think it really does a good job of summarizing the chapter. But make sure you download it. Don't just try to open the thing up. These resources here are very important for you, and I really do want you to take a look at them. Especially this on the difference of estimation, extrapolation, prediction, forecasting, business case and business case analysis. There's a short course in super forecasting, the Good Judgment Project, and Nate Silver's. The Tree Plan Guide is a nice resource, and they will walk you through. It's a PDF. It'll walk you through decision trees using Tree Plan, and Tree Plan is a product, a commercial product that's out there that you can get and add to Excel. They walk you through everything about it, how it all works, etc. So it certainly is worth your time and trouble to take a look at. Okay. Well, I popped us out of the course, so I'll put us back in here. I think that'll about do it. I appreciate your time, and I know this is a much better job than I did last night. I think probably because it's about 12 o'clock at night and I was dead on my feet. Lots to think about here, isn't there? But if you apply these principles and you think about them and you try to make them part of your daily repertoire and you're out there working, you're going to think like a business owner. And you're going to be able to take situations and break them down. It will take you some time to do it. You'll probably have to. When I was a young person, I had to make decisions early in my career. I would use the matrix. I'd use expected values. I did it until it just became second nature to me. And if you work in a particular industry or for a particular employer long enough, you'll be pretty good at choosing the states of nature, the probability of them. Then it becomes an issue of what are my known and or unknown alternatives. This saved me a lot of anxiety. It saved me a lot of time and energy. And I remember I took a management class on strategic management long ago. And we went over decision analysis as a fourth of the course, and I'm so glad it was because it helped me frame decisions so much better and to understand the possible outcomes. There's a range of them. There's always alternatives I may not have thought of. And so I'm always trying to think my way through and in my head do the guesstimation on the states of nature and then know my alternatives. And one of the reasons that they linked this chapter to capital budgeting was you work precisely under those conditions. Okay, folks, thank you again so much. I promised you now about 6 times I was through talking, But this is the part of the course that really is exciting to me because I think it offers you some mental tools and models that if you do them enough times, it just becomes second nature. At that point, I think you're a much better decision maker. All right. Don't forget, you've got the multiple. You need to upload it. That's one of those queuing theory problems we had. Upload the PDC project. And then you've got the 3 exams. That's all due by the 26th. All right, folks. And I will probably upload this PDC project Harmon done over here. You could use that or you can use the PDC. Hope you were following along or you try it to work it on your own. Thanks much. Have a great weekend.